Alright, so for today's project, we're wanting to make a cheap landscaping border for our garden expansion. It's going to wrap around the side of the house. So we had these old bricks that came with the house, these old blocks, and we don't have enough of them, and they're not really our style. So to keep the budget low at the moment, we are going to go with these cheap landscaping timbers. So for 8 feet, an 8-footer, which is how much I'm showing here, it's only about $4.25 at Lowe's or Home Depot, and they're pressure treated, and so they should last a few years. We might be doing this again at some point, but that's for future us to worry about. So I've purchased 16 of them because I'm going to double stack, and so these are easily driven into the ground if you'll first drill a hole in the top and then get some 12-inch nails. And so you're going to want to pre-drill your posts, because otherwise you're going to split them if you just try to hammer this big nail. That's also going to be too much work. And so on the first section, I'm actually driving them in instead of doing it while it's double stacked. And that's so that it can go further into the ground. It'll stay there better. And then on the second stack, I've just got some 4 to 6 inch, I want to say they're 6-inch deck screws, and that's how I'm going to secure the two of them together. And when I go to do a double stack, I'm going to offset the joints to make these interlocked and stronger. And so that's what I'm working on at the moment, is getting the first layer done and about to hop on the second layer. So to cut these, I'm using a miter saw, but if you don't have a miter saw, I wouldn't purchase one for this project. Just use a hand saw. Get your cut somewhat straight so that it doesn't look goofy. If you want to do any type of fancy angles or bends, I would recommend a miter saw then, so you can get your cuts nice and aligned. But for this, we're going to just do a simple half square kind of triangle looking thing. So I'll update you guys a little bit further in the video. Alright, let's talk about tools a little bit more. We got my decking screws in a little bit shorter than I remember. So these are actually 3.5 inches, and you can see that maybe it's too bright. They're long enough to go all the way through and then sunk pretty deep into the next one. So I'd say go between 3 and 5 inches, 3.5 and 5 inches. So these are the ones that I'm using. For the longer screws, forgot to mention the price. The longer nails, these are only 98 cents a piece, so that price adds up. I'm using a total of 8 boards on the bottom section. So I'm going to do 2 nails per board, so that's 16 total. I'd say stay away from the very edges, so that when all of this wood's going to split at some point. You can tell it's already splitting, especially as it dries out. So come a foot in, and then when you do your overlap, say if you're at a corner, you're going to want your longer piece coming all the way ow, I just got myself a splinter from here covering this little section. So I'll probably start here with my overlap and then head that way and then head that way. You're gonna need a variation of drill bit sizes. So I'm using some of the bigger drill bits for the nails, and then to get into both sections, I'm probably gonna use this. This is 10 bucks. You might want to cut this out of the project, because if you want to keep this under $100, this stuff can start adding up. But this is a 1/8 drill bit that's like a foot long, and that's just so I can go through this one and then partially into the next. All right, let's get started. All right, so another thing to consider when you're making your cuts on your timber, these are pressure treated, but given how far we are into the wood, and we're cutting all the way through, you're going to want to seal your cuts. And so I've just got some multi-surface sealant. I bought this 10 years ago. I don't know if I'd recommend this brand. It works. You can buy a much smaller container. And then I don't have a paintbrush today, so I just filled this cup all the way up, and then I just dip in the ends and let it soak for a second. But if you don't want to use much, just get a little bit into a cup and then paint it on the ends. So that way this doesn't decay a lot quicker. Alright, so you'll see my yard's not level, and just laying these out, the second stack's not going to line up because it just tips down at the end right here. So I'm going to lift that up. You could either put some clay, dirt under there, or some paver base. Just don't use something like gardening soil because it's too organic and it'll sink back again over time. Alright, so I just have my shovel under there and I've got it lifted up. I'm going to take this little cut off piece of 2x4, I'll put the dirt right next to it, and then I'm just going to shove it under with the 2x4. And that'll last. This isn't structural. Alright, so here's the cup method I was talking about earlier. So I just cut a piece, and I'm just going to dip it in, let it soak, and take it out. Alright, so when it comes to the second layer, I really don't think you're going to get away with just using those long screws, those long nails through both layers. At least it wouldn't be as sturdy, because I've got a screw here for this section, then there's the smaller section, so I've got a screw and a screw, then this one starts, so I've got a screw, and then lastly I have another screw. So imagine having to use, I mean, you could use a nail right there through that one and a nail through here, but then this one at the end, you don't want a nail that large connecting them, it's all the way over here. So I think you're going to have to at least do a mixture of both. Alright, so I really didn't want to prep the soil too much. This is a pretty quick project. And so I've got some small deviations in the landscape. So if I put this next board butted up against here, it wants to raise up because there's an elevation difference between the two bottom pieces. Raise up maybe 2 inches. And so what I've done is I've scooted it down and just put in a, I don't know, 2.5 foot section. And now when I overlap, there's maybe a 1/4 inch, probably less than that, 1/8 of an inch. So it's one way to hide elevation changes that you really won't even be able to pick up with your eyes. And here's the finished product. It's a total of 53 feet in length. I used altogether 15 of these landscaping timbers. I'd be comfortable probably going another row higher. So if you're contemplating that, it's pretty stable. These are pretty thin, but with 2 rows they're really stable, especially since they're all interlocked with screws on the second layer. Could have done something different with this downspout. Considered notching it out right here, and I might do that later, but for now this will work. I only needed to do a little bit of angles on the end here where the garden starts to swing inwards, and that was between 5 and 10 degree cuts. If you need to know how many degrees you need to do, you can just buy a angle finder. You can get those at Lowe's, Home Depot, Harbor Freight, or Amazon. They're usually between $8 and $15. All right, let me know if you have any questions.